everyone. Becky Baumwall here, she, her, hers pronouns, Artistic Director of Broken Box Mime Theater and your guide through this webinar about physical story, nonverbal communication as a tool for student engagement in the classroom. Woohoo! If you're just starting with us now in part two, do go back to the beginning of part one just to see how I frame my own perspective and ask you to think about your own. I think that's a helpful way to start this work together. In part one, we looked at awareness, considering nonverbal communication. It was all about body language. Now, today, part two, analysis, its place in the virtual classroom. Today, I'm going to offer a tool for organizing your lesson planning around nonverbal engagements. And in part three, we'll do some useful tips and exercises, some games for the classroom, that kind of thing. As you might recall, our thesis for part one was, by learning about the existence of nonverbal communication, I will be better at both controlling its messages, that's what comes from me, the teacher, and interpreting its messages, that's what comes from the student. Our thesis today, by designing lessons that integrate nonverbal communication, I can enrich my teaching methods and classroom experience, whether in person or remote. So now is when I convince you that that's true. Integrating the nonverbal into my lesson planning can create, okay, and I have for the teacher and for the student, let's see. Modeling of vulnerability. If I show you that I can move my face all around and I can move my body all around, it allows the student also to be slightly more vulnerable about their body and their physical engagement. It allows me as a teacher to take a break from talking, which I do love. Diversity is added to the teaching norm. The students get different types of teaching every day, and so do I. It's more interesting for me when I'm not teaching all day the same way. It also gives me an opportunity to introduce context to my students, to make it relevant to them, to their body, if there are different exercises suited for their physical form. For the student, they get experiential learning, woo! Increased retention obviously follows along with experiential learning. When it's embodied, we remember the information more, and we can create a more vivid memory of that lesson. This gives access for nonverbal or non-English speakers, access for visual or kinetic learners, and it gives students an education and awareness of body language, period, which is so useful. We seldom, I said this in part one, but we seldom have a space or language to talk about body language. It's so assumed in a lot of our society and a lot of our interactions or social interactions. So to give students the language to go along with their body language is so helpful. And that awareness can help them on stage or off. Joy and play, oh, it's so much more fun for all of us if we integrate nonverbal. Helping separations between sections, it really helps my brain, especially if I'm in front of a Zoom screen, to say, okay, for this next section, we're gonna get up and stretch and move our bodies. For the next one, I'm gonna ask you all to put your hands on your shoulders. In the classroom, obviously, we do it differently. Everyone stand in a circle for this part. Everyone go to the left wall or the right wall for this part. But that sort of separation can be super helpful. It also gives us a culture of body positivity and autonomy in the classroom, which I'm a fan of no matter what. So hopefully I've convinced you to keep listening. Now let's get into what you are already doing that is nonverbal in your classroom. Do you do silent observing? Without any language, you ask the students to look at something, consider something, whether that's meditation, considering their own breath, or something that you're showing them in the classroom or giving an example of. Is there any time that we're not using any words and just observing? Do you use dance in your classroom? Do you use facial expression language? Okay, kids, I want everyone to smile now. Or, okay, everyone get really sad over in your desk and now transform into someone calm and comfortable. Do you use spatial design? Similar to what I said before, okay, we're gonna start the class in a circle and then I'm gonna do a crossing the room technique exercise, and then we're gonna end all seated in a square. Do you use total physical response? This is a method of teaching that pairs gesture with your words so that kids can follow along, particularly helpful with youngins Or people that are learning English, for example. Okay, I hear you, everyone listen up, and now listen to me talk. Do you use sign language? Do you do follow-alongs? Do you warm up, for example, in front of the Zoom screen saying, okay, everyone's arms up in the air and wide and give your body a hug? Do you have other physical modalities in the classroom? So not just verbal or visual, but something that's tactile. Do your students typically work with clay or markers, or do you have them use certain toys or classroom aids to get that sense activated? Do you do acted outs or charades? Do you do physical modeling? Do you show them how they should be sitting, how they should be listening by leading by example in your own body? What else? What haven't I thought of? What other ways do you use nonverbal communication in the classroom? And I'll say that this can be paired with language, or it can be totally silent. Take a minute, pause the video, and write down for yourself a quick inventory of things you're already doing in the classroom that includes nonverbal communication. You're back. Okay, great. So now that you've done a little self-assessment, we're going to expand the boundaries of what is possible in your classroom. So let's zoom into the student's experience. Okay, is it possible to pair every part of my lesson plan with some sort of physical engagement? I call those PEs, something that has a physical element. And when can I make that physical element entirely nonverbal? I suggest that the right level of integration of that is totally up to you. You're the expert in your classroom. But if you're looking for where to start, here's one way. This beautiful Google Doc is called an inventory of physical engagements. So this is the tool I'm going to walk through with you. There are 3 steps. All right, and I suggest setting it up like this, but obviously you can do whatever you please. This is just how I like to think. I love a good Google Doc. Okay, so step 1 is create a list of physical engagements. Everything you can think of. We mentioned some of them before. Dancing, walking, running, stretching body, charades, gestures, on and on. As the more specific you can get here, the better. Playing with clay, drawing. As you can see, I just worked with what was in the top of my head, but I would work on this probably a little longer and do some big old brainstorming to get to the full list. Now that you've done this, your physical engagements, we do part 2, step 2. We put them into buckets. So this is where your creativity comes in. How do you want to separate these and categorize them? Let's say bucket 1 is paired with language, and bucket 2 is nonverbal. Then I would separate them like this. Great, that's one way I could do it. Or I could do different buckets based on different parts of the body. For example, can do sitting, can't do sitting. And then I would organize it like this. Great. In this one, I have nothing in the must do sitting category, which means maybe I can think of a few things that would exist there. For example, feel your feet on the floor and feel your bum in the chair is something that would exist in must do sitting. And I could find a way to describe that, like finding yourself present in your seat. Let's add that. So what other buckets or categories could we use? Well, I could do based on the part of the body. These all just use the arms. These use the whole body. This can be done on the face. And here's one more way to think about it. Which of these PEs, physical engagements, do I have to give verbal instruction for? And which can I give instruction via pictures or maybe written text? So that's another way you can organize. Whatever your method of organization, this inventory is the first step in your lesson planning. Okay, yay, you did that. Now for part 3. Now that we have our inventory, let's see how we can employ these physical engagements within our own plan. So for this, we'll need a second column. This is the ask. What do you ask your students to do? I'm going to merge these just so that they're all, so we're back in one list. What do you ask your students to do? Let's see, I ask them to respond. I ask them to follow along, to read, to act out, to describe, to discuss, to observe, to analyze, to interpret, to notice. I ask them to collaborate, to guess, etc., etc., etc. This is where you write all the different verbs that you find in your lesson plan. Take a minute, pause, and go ahead and fill out your inventory of physical engagements, steps 1, 2, and 3. You're back. Okay, great. So now that you have filled out a first draft of your inventory of physical engagements, here's how you use it. First, you write your lesson plan, as you do. And you have a part in your lesson where it says, okay, students, answer. Did you notice any metaphors in this passage? That's a sample of a question you might have in your lesson plan. Now I look in this inventory and I see answer, answer, answer. Here it is, answer. Great. And if I don't have it yet, add that to your inventory. So you can keep filling this up and making it more reflective of your own teaching methods. Now I can look in the physical engagement side and connect the dots. Okay, what do I want to use for that answer? Okay, I could have them draw their answer. I could have them mouth words instead of say words. I could have them create their answer with clay or create a gesture for their answer. For this example, I'm going to choose body pose. Let's have them use a body pose. So this is where we get into the second part. This is where we keep our information. Let's see, date, it's October 1st, 2020. And the physical engagement I'm using is body pose. And the ask is to answer. And now I'm going to take a note here, maybe a link to my lesson plan or any notes on how it went when I did this in class. Okay, so for this lesson plan, I'm going to say, okay, count the metaphors. If you noticed one metaphor, you're going to make your body look like a mountain like this. If you notice 2 metaphors, you're going to make your body look like a lake like this. And if you noticed 3 metaphors, you're going to make your body look like a sun like this. So students, take 2 minutes to find how many metaphors you found, note it, and if it's 1, 2, or 3, show me with your body. 1, 2, or 3. If we're on Zoom and the students can't stand up, then I just do it like that, do it seated. If I can get them to stand up, awesome. You can also give them a choice. You can just say, make a mountain with your body. If you've done a warm up with them at the beginning of class, where you get to experiment and explore with different prompts, creating them with your body, they'll already be ready so that when you say, make a sun, they can choose however they want to become the sun. Let's say you've done enough gesturing for the day and you want to give them something else specific to the Zoom screen. You might remember or shout out Nick Abil's webinar on creative technologies. He's also a member of Broken Box Mime Theater and did a fantastic webinar series. Check it out. He talks about the frame of your Zoom screen, like the proscenium of a stage. So let's say I'm going to add to face here in physical engagements, Zoom screen proximity. If you found 1 metaphor, put your head way back here. If you found 2 or 3 metaphors, put your face in the middle. And if you found so many metaphors, put your face up really close to the Zoom screen. In that way, we can use proximity or interacting with this box to give that nonverbal physical engagement you're looking for. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my log. I used body pose and to answer, and my note is The kids seem to like it. This is a great way to include the choreography we taught earlier in the week in a different context. Great. So now I'm keeping track of which one we do. So for me, gesturing plays a huge part in my classroom. So I ask the students to answer with gestures, to create gestures for their names. My name is Becky, everyone go Becky, and then end up communicating with each other through these gestures that we make. I can mark that in my inventory and then come back to it time and time again. You could also say, okay, I tried that gesturing thing, total fail, avoid, and perhaps that can be a nice way to keep track of your growth and what works and what doesn't. Ask the students what they're enjoying. Notice when they're smiling. Those will be great clues to figure out how to make this tool the most useful to you. Okay, so that's it. What is a simple task, I would say, can quickly evolve into a practice that becomes super complex and multi-layered. Your lesson planning will start to feel more like game design, which is always a good thing. So here we are back at the obstacles of nonverbal communication. We discussed this in part 1. I'll ask you now to pause the video and make notes for yourself in your inventory of where obstacles might come into play. This is where the inventory can get really detailed and very helpful and tailored to your students in particular. If you have a student who is nonverbal, if you have a student who cannot physically stand, if you have a student who comes from a culture where direct eye contact is considered rude, which of the physical engagements will best suit your classroom? I recommend color coding of what is useful, green, yellow, red, or using your buckets, your organization in that list form, or you can make little comments in the Google Doc just to keep track, put it in your log, etc. So take a second and look at these obstacles and figure out how you might want to keep track of them in your inventory. So for this, I'm going to ask you to, let's see, reflect. And as promised, I do love a good gesture. So I'm going to ask you both to use breathing. We'll add that, breathing and gestures. Okay, here we go. So first, take a breath in and out. We're going to do that again. Take a breath in and out. Excellent. Continue breathing. Now hold up both hands. Now with your hands and only your hands, act out how this session made you feel. Excited, anxious, overwhelmed. Sometimes the movement will say things that we can't even articulate, and that's okay. It can be abstract or it can be indicative of the actual feeling somehow. There are no wrong answers. Now we're going to take that information. Let's see, it made me feel like this. Now we're going to take that information and roll it into a little ball like this. And now we'll keep that ball wherever you need. Spread it across your keyboard to inform your lesson planning, or place it behind your ear, or throw it out because you have too much to think about. Whatever you want. Take that ball and continue the metaphor by putting it wherever you want. Thanks for following along, y'all. For the final part of our series, we are going to get into some specifics about physical story, exercises, games that you can integrate into your lesson planning. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.